Hi and welcome back. Today we're reading chapter 2 of The Girl Who Speaks Bear. Book by Sophie Anderson and it's illustrated by Catherine Honesta. And again, I'm reading this with permission from Usborne Publishers. So thanks guys. Chapter 2 is called Anatoly. Anatoly arrives at night with ice in his beard and moonlit eyes. Excitement bubbles inside me as I watch him through the frost-coated window. He unharnesses and feeds his sledge dogs, brushes each of them carefully, checks their paws and whispers their names. Nessa, Bayan, Peter, Zoya. Finally, he settles them into the shelter and comes inside. He ducks through the doorway, huge as a bear in his deer skins and furs, but once he peels off his layers and sits by the fire in his threadbare Rabaka tunic, he looks thinner and older than I remember. There are deeper wrinkles around his silvery eyes and more white hairs in his lopsided beard, which doesn't grow evenly because of the burn scars on his cheeks. But his smile is the same. He looks down when he smiles and flushes pink as a bullfinch's belly. It's been 2 months since Anatoly last visited, and though that feels like forever, it's not that long. Sometimes there's half a year or more between his visits, other times a few weeks. I wish he visited more regularly. I miss him when he's not here and spend too much time wondering when he'll come. Anatoly lives alone in the forest, hunting, fishing and trapping animals to survive. No one in the village knew he existed until about 10 years ago, when he turned up on Mamochka's doorstep asking for an ointment to soothe his burns. They were old scars from a forest fire years before, but he said they still ached and itched at night. Since then, Anatoly has visited at least once a year, and often many more times. Occasionally he stays for a night, sleeping by our fire, and people in the village tease Mamochka and say he's her sweetheart. She just laughs and says, "You can't have a sweetheart who spends all their time hiding in the forest." But her eyes shine brighter and her smile spreads wider when he visits. "You look like you haven't eaten since we last saw you." Mamochka pours Anatoly a cup of tea with lemon and passes him a basket of priyanki, soft spice cookies with a glaze as white as snow outside. Mamochka is small, half the size of either Anatoly or me, but she takes up more space. She bustles around, strong and unstoppable, filling the room with as much movement and life as a flight of doves. Anatoly sips his tea, bites his pryanik, and colour floods into his face. I've eaten well, but I've been in the far north these last months, and the cold makes me thin. "What did you find?" I ask, tingling with anticipation for the story. When Anatoly comes out of the snow forests, there's always a story. When I was young, I believed all of Anatoly's tales, whether they were about wolf packs hunting over moonlit snow or fire dragons leaping from volcanoes. Because his stories came from the forest, like me, they felt like clues to my past. Now I know Anatoly's stories are just stories. Mamochka has told me often enough, but I still like to believe them. In the moments when he tells them, and sometimes afterwards, in the depths of night, when the branches outside my window shine silver and I can't sleep for thinking about what secrets the forest holds. Anatoly smiles his shy smile, reaches deep into his pocket and pulls out a map. He smooths the tattered old paper over the low table between us, and I search for the new mark. There's always a new mark hidden somewhere amongst the inky trees to show where the story begins. "Here's the village." Anatoly points to the neat drawing of the village on the southern edge of the map. "And here is your house." His finger hovers over my and Mamochka's house, which is marked by 2 small hearts inside a square. Anatoly always points out all the features on his map. Even though I've seen it so many times I could draw it from memory, but I don't mind. I like listening to his gentle voice rumble against the crackling of the fire, and I like watching his calloused fingers skate through the sketched forest. It also gives me a chance to find the new mark on my own. The mark might be a large feature, like the picture of a crumbling castle that appeared last year to go with a story about a bear who had once been human. Or it might be a small feature, like the claw hidden in a glade that sparked a story about how a lone baby girl stood up to a pack of wolves. Anatoly told me that story when I was very young, and I still have the wolf claw he gave me under my pillow. Sometimes running my finger along it makes me feel brave, but at other times the sight of the thick, dark hook as long as my thumb makes me pull my blankets tight around me. My gaze drifts across the map, north through the forest along a narrow, winding trail. Creatures hide amongst the trees. Wolves and wolverines, badgers and bears, snakes and squirrels. Past the first of Anatoly's 5 cabins, the trail disappears. So I follow the silver stream instead, its rippled surface dotting with ice floes and leaping fish. The Yaga house has moved again. I point to a drawing of a house with chicken legs, nestled in a pine thicket. Winter has been harsh this year, Anatoly nods gravely. The house got so cold its knees splintered. It stood up in the middle of the night, and the crack sounded like thunder. I heard it over 10 miles away. It ran south, its feet pounding along the riverbank, until it warmed up and settled in this cosy thicket. The Yaga who lives in the house wasn't happy at all, as she doesn't like moving closer to the living. You know, Yaga prefer dead souls. Dead souls and houses with chicken legs. Mamushka folds her arms over her chest and shakes her head. You fill her mind with nonsense, Anatoly. There's truth in all my stories, Anatoly says quietly. He glances up at me with a look of such sincerity that I want to tell him I believe every tale he's ever told. Instead, I rise to my feet and open the long wooden box on the mantelpiece. Inside is my favourite ink pen and my own copy of Anatoly's map. I drew it myself the last time he was here, and although it's not as neat as his, I'm proud of it. I roll it out on the table and carefully draw the house with chicken legs in its new position. Mamochka disappears into the kitchen, still muttering about nonsense. She only believes in things she can see for herself. But she wasn't always so dismissive of Anatoly's stories. When I was younger, she used to repeat them to me before bed in her matter-of-fact style. Or she'd sing me the songs of her ancestors about the power of nature and the healing magic of the forest. But she seems to have decided that 12 years old is too old for stories. Last time Anatoly visited, after I went to bed, I heard Mamochka tell him she worries that his stories keep me wondering about my past. Anatoly told her I'm a magical bear child who will always wonder where I came from. Mamochka replied it would be better if my heart was in the village, rather than getting lost in the stories of the forest. At that point I turned over in my bed, not wanting to hear any more, and sang myself to sleep. I finished drawing the house with chicken legs and leaned back over Anatoly's map to see what else is new. But my gaze lands on the blue mountains, and I can't pull it away. Nestled high in a cliff is a sketch of a bear cave where I was found, with me as a baby inked inside, snuggling into the arms of Bear Serena. Anatoly always refers to the bear who raised me as Serena, a queen of the snow forest. My feet ache with the same restless feeling I had earlier after I heard the bullfinch speak. Outside the snow glistens and an urge to make footprints in it swells inside me. The bear cave. Anatoly's voice cuts through my thoughts. He gently touches the map right next to the cave, where your Mamochka found the most precious treasure ever discovered in the snow forest. Mamochka places a mug of Splitten in front of me and drops a kiss onto my head. She smiles at Anatoly and he smiles back without looking away. And for a moment I feel like the three of us belong together, like a real family. How long are you staying? I blurt out, then regret the question because Anatoly's face burns bright red, all the way to his ears, and he doesn't answer. Mamochka leans down and tops up the teapot with hot water from the samovar. Steam rises when she opens the tap in the shining brass urn, the heat in the air disguising Anatoly's blushing. "What's that?" she asks, pointing at a tiny triangular mark on the map. I peer at the triangle embedded high in the trunk of a tall, slim birch. Inside the triangle is the letter N, with a crown on top. It's the new mark. Excitement rushes through me, washing away the twinge of disappointment I felt at not finding the mark myself. And it has something to do with the Princess Nastasia. I recognise the crowned N as her symbol. Anatoly has told me stories about her before, and some of them have hinted that she might be my birth mother. The thought that that might be true, and that I might learn something about her, gives me a sudden, breathtaking thrill, like skidding, slightly out of control on ice. Anatoly pulls an object wrapped in cloth from his pocket and passes it to me. It's as big as my palm, heavy, and feels cold through the cloth. Mousetrap pokes his head out of his hole in the corner near the fire and sniffs the air. He's a fierce and proud hunter and never begs for food, unless it's freshwater cod bought by Anatoly. But it's not cod in the parcel. Inside is a triangular ice blue rock, smooth as glass, with a tip and edges as sharp as a knife. Anatoly has made a hole in the wide end and threaded it with a leather cord so it can be worn as a necklace. The rock trembles in my hand. It feels unnaturally cold, like there's a snowstorm inside it. The corners of Mousetrap's mouth turn down when he realises there's no fish on offer. But perhaps he catches a scent of a story to come because he edges closer, scoots up the back of my chair, settles onto my shoulder, and stares at Anatoly expectantly. I breathe in Mousetrap's familiar smell of dust and earthy musk and reach up to give him a stroke, but he pushes my finger away. Mousetrap loves sitting on my shoulder, but he doesn't like being fussed or petted. "Is this an arrowhead?" I ask, holding the rock up to the window so that it shimmers with starlight. Anatoly nods. "It's for you. The Princess Nastasia's last arrow." His voice cracks a little and he takes another swig of tea. "It's beautiful. Thank you." I lift the necklace over my head, being careful not to disturb Mousetrap, then turn to show Mamochka. "It looks lovely on you," Mamochka smiles. "But with those sharp edges, it doesn't seem very safe to wear." She raises her eyebrows at Anatoly and he looks down apologetically. "Would you like to hear the arrow's story?" Anatoly asks. "Yes, please." Goosebumps shiver over my skin. Although I've heard stories about the Princess Nastasia before, I've not heard one about an arrow. Mousetrap lets out a squeaky yawn, stretches and curls around my neck. "Princesses and arrowheads," Mamochka tuts as she returns to the kitchen, where she makes a show of putting away the fish and game Anatoly has bought us. But I see her through the doorway, listening. Mamochka might not believe Anatoly's stories, but she's not immune to their magic. Perhaps Anatoly's stories are too fantastic to be true. But wrapped up in one of his tales, with the fire crackling in the hearth and ice glistening on the windows, I can believe that one day I'll find my own story, and it will shine as brilliantly as a clear night sky. There is truth in my stories, Anatoly whispers as he passes me a pyramid. I smile and take a bite of the soft cookie. Then Anatoly begins, as he always does, with "Once upon a time." I hope you enjoyed.